Yeah, good morning.
Hey, Michael. It's so good to be with you always.
Yeah, time we just reconnected. I think we've done three of the fear talks on my series, and today I'm thinking of doing a talk of 50 years plus of folly and wisdom.
Great title. Great title.
And so that just gets to be about us reconnecting and perhaps viewers finding something useful to. Yeah, I feel like I've been in the industry of education transformation for 50 years. You certainly have, if not more, but also in leadership. Both of us very interested in that, both living it, dying under it, reborning under it, and then watching what is going on in leadership today and what's going on with, higher education. These are just some of the topics, and I want to really give good emphasis and time to new changes going on for you, particularly, and particularly in some of the real cases, if you will, of actual happenings that you feel you can talk about, without breaking confidentiality and so on. But that's really important because that's the practitioner as well. So I see us both as philosopher types, as activists, as theorists, as practitioners. And
I
so
remember when we first
wide open.
when you jumped into the dissertation, I think it was called the authentic dissertation. And I remember that we kind of wasn't that where we kind of
Yep,
started?
definitely. Yeah. You
Yeah.
emailed me. You emailed me.
Right, right. Because I had seen your work, and I like this. I
Uh-huh.
said, this guy's doing it. He gets this. He gets this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't. I think you were the only one that had email. Everybody else had responded to
Oh,
uh,
okay.
my calling. I put in, yeah. But anyway, that was the
Yes.
beginning.
So in
And
that sense, unmet, we were unmet,
yeah,
right? Unmet personally for years and years. And it wasn't really till 2016 at that conference that you were at with Darsha at the uh,
right.
yeah, I forget the college
Notre
there,
Dame at
Notre
University of
Dame.
Notre Dame.
That was
Yeah.
the only time, and I remember meeting and you said you didn't even know who I was. And I even said my name and you were so involved with so many people and you said,
Oh no,
oh,
I don't
oh,
remember
okay, but
that.
you
Oh
didn't
no.
even remember me, It's like because you didn't really know me and you hadn't seen me, but I'd seen you. So that was the difference.
Well,
But
you had really seen me because of
yeah. Well,
holy
because I had
cow.
been doing research on you, of course, as well. But the thing that was interesting about that first connection, which is important to say, is it really taught me something about my own ability to be a good researcher, by the way. Is, you sent back, I hadn't really heard of you at that time, and you said, I'm doing this book, Authentic Dissertations, it's going to be an anthology, everybody gets to contribute story, you're going to comment and have characters in it. It was very performative in art space. So I thought, well, okay, that's it, I'm in. And this is 4 years after I'd finished my dissertation. So it's 4 years after, and I'm in total grieving mode because I didn't get a job. I didn't get interviews. I wanted to be a professor, right? I had the big dream and I thought I was a really good researcher, had really good grants. It looked good. I'd lots of publications, but I met you, didn't know who you were. And I remember distinctly, and it sounded really good. And I says, oh, I'm going to write about my dissertation, which is called Fearless Leadership in and Out of the Fear Matrix. You were into that, rather than going, that's weird. Like, so here's an educator that actually gets something. And then I remember you saying, well, you might want to check my book on primal awareness, da da da. I've done some work here, right? And I remember at that time, of course, the media was not quite as up to date on how to search stuff, right? So you go on and you'd find little bits, but it was kind of an angle and you didn't really get everything. I just remember how I went, yeah, okay, nah, no. It took me several years. I'm getting you not several years to finally go, maybe I should go back and look at primal awareness. Just scanned it, right? And then you'd had some stuff on the hypnotic communication that you had shared a couple of references. But I just didn't jive with it. Like it just wasn't a jive for me, right? And this is what happens as academics. You get so used to yes, no, because you're looking at so much stuff. And I put it off. I put it off. I put it off. And when I went back in, I think it was like 2011, when I really went back in because I was thinking of writing and researching on you again. And I went back in and read Primal Awareness again and actually read something, actually got the book, number one. And I realized I've just spent 4 years missing my most important contact in education and fear and fearlessness research for it. Isn't that? I mean, it just was, I'm giving you the lesson was
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
folly. That was folly. It took me 4 years because I was, in so sense, driven by my own agenda. I couldn't see what was right in front of me.
But maybe you were more ready then
Yeah,
because of it
of
too.
course.
That's the folly does that for us, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we wake up and
Yeah.
we understand it, then it's even more fodder for the change.
So do you have a big folly experience as an
Oh,
academic that you think
well,
of?
I mean, I'll tell you, oh, just, I have to just say to you that the one folly that's recent is my not having picked up your book for 6 years.
Yeah.
All right. So that
2018,
that was
2018.
published in 2018, and of course, we did a interview with each other after each chapter,
Yeah, you
and
read each
so
chapter.
I had but I was busy, and I just wanted to make sure that you weren't misquoting me. I didn't really
Yeah,
pay attention to
exactly.
all of your writing, and so when we did the interview, I still hadn't really read the book, and so. I had it, got copies for my family and people, and I didn't pick it up to read it, and until like 3 weeks ago, and I emailed you, and I
You
s-
did, yeah.
and I kind of apologized. And I said, Michael, I got to tell you, I'm starting to read your book. Remember, and and so I'll just say it again for our audience here. So I don't know whether the folly was an artificial sense of humility and, oh, I can't read a book about myself kind of a thing, or was it with your 140 to 150 footnotes after every chapter that I go, wow, maybe I'm not going to agree with his interpretations of me, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe instead of a fear of you of not being humble, it was a fear of all the people that would read it saying that, oh, something I disagreed with. I don't think it was either one of those things. But why didn't I not pick it up? Um, I don't know, and that's something that is a folly in itself, not knowing.
But
But
what's come from it? What's come from it? The reading.
well, I mean, I picked it up during. I just had a case here and I'm in Mexico, and I was called about 9 days ago by a woman who lives over in this Corrales. Is a very wealthy community nearby, and she and her husband had come over for an inipi ceremony with my daughter, who had said that it would really be good for them, right? And it was a positive experience, so that was how I knew her.
Okay.
So months went by, and I hadn't seen her or anything, but I get this call, and she's in a panic, and she says, 4 arrows, 4 arrows, please, you have to come. Uh, my girlfriend's boyfriend just drowned, and we're on Tayopa Beach.
We're talking teenagers.
Yeah, 18-year-old boy and a 16-year-old daughter, and he had come from back east, and uh, they didn't. Nobody knew his family, and I hadn't met anybody, her or him, just the mother and father. So I grabbed my my eagle feather and sage, and I went there. And when I arrived on the beach, she was almost in shock, and just and her mom and dad and sisters were around her, but it wasn't working, because they were all equally in this state of, well, he actually had uh, left to go out back swimming. You know, she kept saying, "You got to find him. You're not finding him." And he
Oh,
actually went back out and was swimming back and forth, looking for the body. And and you can imagine the trauma because they were right on the beach. It was a beach that they shouldn't have been on. It's a
oh,
pretty dangerous,
interesting. Okay.
yeah, pretty dangerous beach. In fact, I told one of the owners of Correas, you better put some signs up. But actually, they actually, you know, were trying to hold on to him, and he panicked. You know, in fear, 70% of drownings really are based on people that panic.
And this
And
is riptide pull.
yeah, and when you panic in a riptide, you don't have a chance.
Okay.
In a riptide, you've got to be completely, totally just relaxed and going with it, let it flow with you, kind of, and then look for your out to the left or right. And
Mm,
if you panic, it just
mm,
holds you. It just holds you.
okay.
And in
That's a
fact,
quite the metaphor, huh?
yeah, yeah, it is. And interestingly, the body actually, I had a friend of mine flying back and forth for 2 days looking for the body. Um, but the body actually came up right where it went in. So it must have been just doing just what I'm saying. Yeah, and but anyway, the end result. I mean, when I came there, my strategy was just to, I started talking to the people that were around her, really meaning for my words to be heard by the young lady, but not talking directly to her. And I just said, please, everybody, you've got to move away from her. You can't be touching her. She's sacred. She's sacred. She's as close to death as we will ever be. She just lost her first love. She is sacred. Please. And you can see a change
Oh
in
yeah, I
the young
love
lady.
that
Young,
intervention.
the
That's
young lady
great.
had no clue, that was the last thing.
Exactly.
Everybody else would say, I know this is hard or whatever, you're gonna be okay or
Mhm,
whatever.
mhm.
But anyway, long story short, I managed to I drew a circle around her and I said I can't come in the
Nice,
circle.
nice, nice.
But long story short,
Yeah,
the family flew in of the deceased boy.
yeah.
Amazing couple.
Okay.
Uh, no anger, no blame, being thankful of the other mother and father for all their efforts, and they were just an amazing couple, and then of course that couple said, well, what really helped us was Foro's ceremony, so they came the next night and we had everybody in there, and the bottom line was.
Just explain the in there for a minute.
Yeah, so an Inipi ceremony, Inipi is Lakota for the place you go to be born again. And the lodge itself is called Initi. And traditionally, yeah, I've always built it with 14 willows, and then you cover the willows with a tarp. But I wanted to honor the Toltec and the history of the people here in Mexico, so I built what's called a temescal, and so the architecture is a sort of a concrete dome. Um, and anyway, so you go into it, and we do 4 doors. The first door you pray for, in my tradition. Because I am one of the 7 sacred ceremonies of the Lakota is the Hunkpapa, which is the making of a relative. And so I am a made relative according to Rick Two
Right.
Dogs. That's where I'm gonna go as the Lakota spiritual world, and to make a decision where to go afterwards, right? So I'm authorized to pour water for Inipi ceremonies and do a lot of them here. And I'm sad to see that people are charging money for them over in Correas, and I've had talks with folks that say just ask for donations. Don't charge money if you really have people that are gathering the wood and which they do, and the fire and all that. But anyway, yeah. So first of all, we pray in my approach is our doors facing the west, and we pray for ourselves so we have the strength to help others. And then we open the door. Sometimes we'll go out to the ocean. Sometimes we'll just tell jokes or talk about whatever is pressing. And the second door, we pray for the four-legged, the two-legged, the swimmers, the crawlers, the rooted ones, the flyers, whatever comes to you. And all the while, everybody's I'm drumming and everybody's
Okay.
has rattles. Many of the songs are sacred syllables, so they're fairly easy to sing. I use the Lakota language throughout. And then the third round is bringing a flowing balance back into the world. According to my learning when I lived on Pine Ridge, they added to that the importance of bringing women and the feminine energy back. That wasn't the original tens of thousands of years ago. It was about balance. But now it's about bringing that matriarchal
Nice.
respect back into the world, and so we pray for that, and and then the last round is giving thanks, right? And so what we had done, the women, the family uh, of the girl had brought everybody over that night, and we had some success. But and when I said at the last round, I said when we're done uh, with the third round, I want everybody to go out silently and walk to the ocean, and I want you to
Which is 80 steps away or 90 steps
yeah
away.
90 steps away, and I said I want you to walk out in silence, and I want you to when you get to the sand, and you've only got another 10 steps. I want you to know that for sure you're about to die. Maybe a train hit you or a car accident or the old age or whatever it is. I want you to say, there's a moment when you know you're dying and that you're just right at the steps. Like I know I've experienced it. And then I want you to go ahead and without hesitating and stopping at the water or feeling it being cold or, I just want you to keep moving. And if there are some waves, dive under them. Most of all the people were swimmers. Um, and then what I want you to do is just for 5 to 20 seconds or so, hold your breath, and I want you to visualize the beauty of the transition.
Yeah.
I just want you to imagine a beautiful light, feel amazing music, and see your ancestors and the spiritual world and the power of the beauty of this un this great mystery, and so I do that regularly, and but I stayed back with the young girl.
Mhm.
Yeah, knowing that she wouldn't even get out, she wouldn't even think about it anyway, right? But I didn't want to have any pressure on. So her and I stayed back, and I said, today is not about getting back on the horse. It's not about your attitude towards this ocean having taken your first lover.
So it's
And she,
kind of interesting for a moment there. It's like you're not asking her to be brave.
no,
Isn't that
exactly.
so interesting?
Yes.
That is so non what we do in the West.
Yeah. Yeah.
Be
Absolutely.
brave. Face
Absolutely.
your fears. You're doing everything indirect. This is just like makes me just like, oh yeah,
No, yeah, no,
so important.
you're like you get it, you're catching that
Oh
observation,
yeah, yeah,
and so and I really went to that opposite direction in our
yeah.
conversation. I said, the morning that you've got to do, but then the next night when the
Okay.
family flew in from back east of the boy and they brought her over, we did the same thing after the third round, and everybody went out and did the same thing. And I said, I want you to come with me. And so I just come with me. And so
So
we
at this
we
time you wouldn't touch her necessarily. You're keeping space. How do you do it? How do you?
Yeah, she just came with me. She just
Is it the authoritative voice that you often talk about in your cat fawn model? You still have to have come with me, right?
yeah,
It's not just
yeah.
come with me, come with me. It's sort of a fine line, isn't
It's the
it?
right amount, and and the trust had been
Yeah,
also
very.
right.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
see that. And a witnessing community, right? You had been building a witnessing community.
that's right. And yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And anyway, long story short,
Yeah, do tell.
we wound up swimming out with the mother of the boy into the deep blue black water with a full night sky of stars. And we have microluminescence here fairly regularly, and I've seen it thousands.
Bioluminescence or
Yeah,
microluminescence?
bioluminescence is the correct word, and I've I love it, and it comes maybe once or twice a month, uh, and it's just amazing, right? Well, I've never seen it this amazing. It was thick. And it was like as we did the breaststroke, just everything was lights lit up, and you could write your name and the letter of your first, letter would like stay for almost a second and a half, right? And it was just you could look down at your toes and wiggle them, and you'd see lights, and so I was really making the best of trying to transition into this different focus for her, and it worked, and she was writing her name, and then I thought, okay, I've got to get out of this picture. I've been in the picture way too much for the last 48 hours. And the mother I saw right away was a powerful, powerful soul. And of the mother, I'm talking about the mother, both of
Exactly.
them were, but the other mother who she's going to be working with me. She's that's going to be she's got a lot to what she saw. But the mother that was the mother of the boy, I knew that she had things to say to this young lady. And so I said, okay, you guys, I'm going to leave you for a minute. I'm going to go down. And I said, you'll see my whole body. So, it's kind of cool to watch me. So I dove down. I held my breath as long as I could, and I kind of swam away. When I came back, the two were embracing. And I don't think they would mind me sharing this because it was so powerful. And the mother said to the daughter, they were face to face, holding each other, honey, we're the only two women that my son ever loved. And his seeing you out here in this ocean and knowing how your strength is and your courage and your love is brought you into this place that has taken him. And it was so powerful. I mean, I didn't want to be around because I'd have been crying, and but it was so powerful. It was so powerful. And then we did a thing on the beach the next day, a bonfire inviting the community
Mm.
and everybody, so it was, my wife says that if had they not done ceremony, it would have been completely different, so I think that's a good story that relates, your work of fearlessness to spirituality. But but going back to your book, um, I've finished it
Okay.
2 days ago. I'm starting it again.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm telling you what, it's like, it's not about me. It's
Yeah.
really not about
Yeah.
me. It's really about I'm sort of the opportunity for different stories for you to explain how fearlessness works, and you bring in other citations and your own wisdom, and it's like, holy cow, if I really had grasped that this wasn't about me,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
kind of knew it intellectually because you called
For
it an
sure. For sure.
biography,
Yeah.
but I just want to tell you that what you have written, I'm now not just I want to order as many copies as I can. I've got it out now on my desk so that when people come over, I tell them, I say, if you want to know about fearlessness, we're going to do some work on it, because it's part of the cat fawn work, of course.
Right, right.
But if you really want to get into a study of it and a deep dive, you got to get this book. And there's already two people that have written the title down just in the last 4 days
Yeah.
that I've been doing this. So I just want to apologize. I already did to you that
Mm.
I didn't do it, but I just want to thank you that for I'm just sorry that I waited so long. Of course, it wouldn't have done me any good until
Yeah. Uh,
recently anyway,
well,
because
four arrows is, I don't think there's a coincidence. I
there's
mean,
no there are no
right?
coincidences.
I mean, if you think about the fact of you being in higher education, full blast for 25 years, you've been in longer than that, but you've been on
Yeah.
this full track, right? 25 plus years at your two institutes, the major last two institutes. Certainly the last institute, not very long, but it's like, then all of a sudden you're out. You're already stepping out of this long trajectory of helping others. Dedicated, dedicated, dedicated. And you're stepping out. That's like dying. And what shows up is what was underneath your nose. So freaking close underneath your nose. It's got your
It's
name on the
amazing.
cover. It's got your name on the
I know. I know. I know. And
cover.
the time, exactly. Yeah. No, that's one of the really the
It's like the
mantras.
double, right? It's like your double
Yeah.
in shamanic terms. It's like your double shows up. But you see, you were too busy. You were too busy helping others. How could you even have, bandwidth, right? And that's the kind of idea, bandwidth, or whatever it is called, awareness, capability, some space.
Well, what's happened with that is
Yeah, what's
is
happened?
obviously a synchronicity, but what I'm finding is, Jung didn't go deep enough. I mean, synchronicity to me is the interconnectedness of spiritual vibrations, and I saw that interconnection in the lodge, and I'm going to share an experience. We usually don't. Wow, I got mixed emotions,
I
but
hear you.
well, I probably won't. But the things that are there's just no such thing as any coincidence anymore, especially now in these days
Yeah,
for people who are tuned in. I think that's really an important thing for people to
right.
recognize.
Well, we'll note that right here. So
Okay.
what's the word you'd rather use? You mentioned synchronicity. Is there another word, or are
Well,
you
I know I think
comfortable?
it is spiritual vibrations
Okay.
that are communicating. And in that communication, your spirit gets the information, and participates in whatever it was that we say, wow, that's amazing. That's why I really kind of wanted to use this example in the lodge because it was a synchronicity, but it was manifested as spirit, right? And so yeah, so I think that we remember that we are containers, of a spirit that, and I don't know if you remember when I wrote a book called Patient Communication for First Responders, and it was banned when I was in Australia because a medical doctor said this should not be used by first responders, but only by licensed physicians. Well, now a new book is the revision of it has come out,
Yeah.
right? And it just came out, and it's got and hypnosis is in the title this time, you know.
Victory.
Yeah, big victory. And then I got the top emergency room physicians in the world endorsing it. So I'm sitting there writing it, and B comes, revising for the original text, and B comes in, and I said, B, I'm so glad this book got banned 20 something years ago. She says, "What do you mean? You've always been pissed off about that, right? Because it was saving lives." And I said, "I was such a terrible writer back there. My writing is so much better now, and plus I got internet, and I can give
Right.
case studies, and to support how you can stop bleeding and stuff like that,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're talking about, yeah, all the different connectivities and kind of almost like it's not just about being sensitive, is it? In a way, I mean, you can develop your sensitivity, right? Everything from ESP capabilities, psychic capabilities. People can work on that, train on that to develop sensitivity. I think that's one thing. It's like one part of the skill set. The other part of the skill set is what I've experienced, and I think just theoretically, I think about it. There also has to be a vertical dimension to capabilities of psychic capacity. And what do I mean by a vertical dimension? There has to be a deeper ontological connectivity that at least has something to do with everything from ancestors before and after, more than human before and after one's capabilities. So that the psychic ESP, capabilities, very exciting because they connect us in those subtle realms of energies, resonances. But I find without a structural, and this is often what traditions have been so good at, right? So we now go, quote, pre-modern or before modernity, where there was more vertical structuring of what I would even call natural hierarchies of knowing and connectivity that are a part of wholeness. They are not political hierarchies, but they are saying there is an order and a maturing development that you'll be able to actually know what to do with those psychic capabilities other than get excited and charge money for workshops because you've got skills you can teach people. I think this is what you have been able to early in your life when you made the transition to reintegrate your, indigenous background. It started to give you a vertical structure to the capabilities of using hypnosis, using these sensitive resonant energies, your own NDE experience. You see, without the maturation developmental framework and ancestral framework, I think that's where a lot of new agey kind of stuff gets off the rails.
Well, I think I want to talk a little bit more about this because there's one possibility of a misunderstanding that I think comes from the maturing perspective. And I'm thinking right now of, Maslow's hierarchy. And we know now that Maslow's hierarchy wasn't what he really understood it to be. For the audience, he spent in 1936 his internship on the Blackfoot Reservation. And he
Didn't
thought
know
that,
that.
yeah. And so he thought, well, his theory, of course, was that you have to have this fundamental pyramid before you get to self-actualization. And
Basic
that
needs, basic needs, yeah.
basic needs, right? And that at the top, very, very few people, ever get to self-actualization. And then of course Kohlberg came in and his developmental model showed the same thing. Very, people do things for this reason, and this reason, but for just for satisfying the law or satisfying, your ego or satisfying somebody else. Very few people do it because it's the right thing. Well, I remember on Pine Ridge when I read Kohlberg, I was seeing 7-year-olds taking care of their family, and I thought, wait a minute, and of course, most of the subjects were white men, and weren't women, so I was critical of that. But Kohlberg, I mean, Maslow's situation was very interesting because he wanted to go and test that theory, but on the reservation, was shocked to find that these savages, on a prison camp, was just the opposite. He wrote that 80% were self-actualized instead
Oh,
of the
yeah.
old standards, right?
I haven't seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just put in the truth about Maslow or something like
Cool.
that. It'll come
Okay.
up. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so he was blown away by it,
Nice.
and in essence, he was saying they see the born child, the infant,
Yeah.
as fully enlightened and is totally spiritual. They're so because they're so close to spirit and they're fully enlightened. And so the pyramid was sort of turned upside down by another scholar. It wasn't Maslow who did it, but you'll see when you Google it, they'll have this upside down pyramid.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just the kind of the opposite. You start out self-actualized. You start out enlightened, and then from that point on, it's up to the community to perpetuate that and to prevent it from being lost from all the things that humans can do in their, you know, and indigenous cultures always knew those things of jealousy and greed
Oh
and
yeah.
envy. And, their origin stories talk about animals teaching us how not to do that. So we know that humans have always been considered to be malleable, and their cultures were nature based on the balance of nature, so that it didn't happen. So Maslow, he saw this and he went, I can't say this. I'll be laughed out of the university. My work will not be accepted that I'm saying that these indigenous people in this anti-Indian world are more self-actualized, in the poverty of their reservation. And later on, he wrote a letter really that was sort of apologetic and anyway, so it's I think that I totally get what you're saying, but I would kind of move away from it, or with this in mind, because so many people including me, brought up with Maslow and the hierarchy of needs. I would say that there is a maturity, maybe we could use that word, but it's sort of the maturity is remembering who we are, and who we are was where we came from in a way, and that's a spiritual essence of who we are, and that the we learn here is to learn how not to lose it.
Well, for sure, you have to learn how to not use it, but I think you also have to learn how to integrate it with what actually is here too. And this has got to do with social structures, it's got to do with political structures, economic structures, things that we don't like and don't want, but you sort of say it in yourself as like, setting up the dominant worldview and the indigenous worldview. You're also saying, but we have to figure out how to integrate those in a way at the same time.
Right.
So that for me is the maturation process.
Yeah, and
Like
that makes sense.
I it
And that's really where that union of the opposite,
yeah,
comes in to be
that's
able to
right.
look at, and that's hard. That what you
Whoa, that's very
that
hard.
kind of look, if we call it maturation, to really recognize that what you think is completely the opposite really isn't. That really does require that kind of work.
It's huge for us, and I know that's been hard for you to communicate with. I think a lot of people will probably they'll get a part of your model, right? That, but they're not going to often get that other
Oh no,
part.
in fact, most liberal professors will look at it and go, "This is a rigid dichotomy,
Yeah,
and I'm wise enough to know that that's wrong. I'm not even going
yeah.
to look."
And then you'll get the other ones, I'm sure, who are going to jump on. Oh, now I got the right way, and that was the wrong way. All
Oh
right,
yeah,
let's
or
do
that
the
too.
right way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And now I got it.
that's most people will that way.
That's most people.
Yeah, and then the ones that are more enlightened will say, this is bad because it's but then the ones who are even more enlightened get whoa, you read the thing,
So
it said,
that's a kind of more enlightenment. You're
I got you.
using that language. That's the
Yeah,
kind of maturation.
yeah.
We can have access to really high levels. Like you're saying, children, we can have access to state experiences and resonances at very high levels of integration connectivity. But the problem is you still got to go to grade one and you still got to deal with the damn world and you're not in control when you're in grade one, or whatever. You still have to go through these processes. And that's where you do have to
That's
have these
only, but
buffers.
here's the catch
You
to
have
it
to have
again.
buffers.
The catch to it is that that's only because of the world we're in. That didn't happen when we were constantly
Yeah.
being in that, right? And so what we're bombarded by is a dominant worldview that is contraindicated in a way. It's not nature based. So if you're growing up and you're
Yeah.
enlightened and you're in like Darcia Narvaez's, work on how her evidence about this, if you had that kind of infancy, that
Nesting.
first 5 year nesting, yeah, that nesting, and then everything from that. You make physical mistakes in terms of knowledge about how to make your bow or how to deal with this, right? And those are the things though that so it's always like, how do you hold on to that spiritual essence?
Yeah.
And we don't think of it that way because we think, oh no, this is the world. So
Yeah.
we've got to enlighten, we've got to become above it. And I think that's a subtle and difficult thing
Yeah,
to
yeah. It's a very complicated conversation, you know.
yeah.
It's like, I the idea of in the transformation theories, that I've looked at, it's like, okay, this idea, well, you have to include, but also transcend. And then you have to include again and transcend. And you have to include again.
But if you remember that we are spirits, and that spirit is whole, the spirit isn't going through all of this.
It's
The
not going
spirit,
through all of it. I agree. I
so
agree.
and so if we can remember that and get in touch
Mhm.
with that, and you get in touch with that by spending some time in with a tree, or instead of before you have to kill that cockroach, take some time to appreciate it, and then you can be forgiving, and apologetic and respectful before you kill it, right? Or whatever. I mean,
And far arrows, you seem to have specialized. I'm hearing more and more, and especially with the story you told earlier, with this couple and the bioluminescence essence story in the ocean. You seem to have specialized over the years to really bring people to near-death experiences. Now, that's just I'm doing that because I know that was one of your most powerful transformational experiences. And that was a physical, psychic, soulful, near death experience. And it seems like you're just building a technologies and have been. This is just part of what you do. Technologies of how to walk people down the death path. So this walking to the ocean after an NP ceremony, you're actually asking them to walk on the sand, and when you get 10 feet from the ocean, now die. Because you know what? You're going to die in some level, some form, right? So it feels like you're just specializing more and more on how to take people to the death place, the death walk, through
well,
prepared
this is another
spiritual
example.
ceremony.
This is another example of what you do in the book. This is your insight, right? And I'm learning right now that, and I'm just like, I don't know how this is going to come out because I'm just learning from what you just said. I think you're right. And I'm thinking that I do that with every client, with every problem.
Do you? That's interesting.
And I think I do it like metaphorically.
Mm-hmm.
If I just had a client for nail biting,
Okay.
a senior, uh, very squared away person, but and
Habitual, chronic, can't
yeah,
change it. Yeah.
yeah. I think based on what you just said, I think I see the concept of dying, the concept of not being ready for death in the nail biting.
Yeah. I don't doubt it.
Do you see what I think?
I don't doubt it at
I
all.
never thought about this before, but and it sounds silly as I say it because I think it's not as perfect as what you're saying. But in a way, I think that all of the things that we do that are traumatic to the world, are traumatic to ourselves, are are relating to death and us not and us being afraid of it. So bringing in the fear. And in a way, that's what happened to me is that overcoming of the fear of death on the river. And I
Yeah.
think I think now, man, yeah, I mean, I got goosebumps. I think now and I never thought about that the nail like nail biting,
I know. Yeah, exactly.
So thank you.
Yeah, I guess we're just basically saying it's not just a simple psychological behavioral. You don't do psychological behavioral. You can do it. You're very pragmatic and you know how to help people with very practical issues. Like, that's just all your background. I've always said you're so pragmatic, but you have this other foundation that's been built through all kinds of reasons. And then I think back to your, your 4-year-old in your story in the book. It's like you told me the story of your 4-year-old running around the couch, building death scenes. You're building death dramatic scenes over and over and performing other people dying and you dying. And lo and behold, your first career, my friend, is so
Let me tell
military.
your audience what
Oh,
you're
come
talking.
on. You
Yeah,
bet. Go for it.
let me tell your audience what you're talking about. And I got a kick out of it both times I've read it because I'm back at that part again. Because I had totally forgotten about that,
Yeah,
and
you told me that quite a few years ago. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But so yeah, one of the first things that I did when I was four years old, I would go over to my grandfather's and a house, and I guess I had watched some movies on television,
No
with
doubt.
my dad, and
You also have ancestors in the military, right? Like
oh
the
yeah, my dad did 36
yeah.
combat
So
missions in World War.
it's in there.
It was in there, and my namesake, Donald Trent Jacobs.
Mm,
He died on VJ Day. He was a military guy. Anyway, it was something. I was a Marine,
hmm
and I would try to take the hill or something. And each time I would be a different person, I would go with courage and fortitude and helping my comrades. And I had set up these little stools. They were soft stools, like you say, couches. And I had them set up around. So that was my stage. I set it up before Grandpa.
Obstacle courses as well.
Yeah, before Grandpa and Nanny came down.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. And they would sit back and they would watch me. And of course, I would go, and walkie-talkie, and I'd get my rifle and I'd go, I'll get it. And I would run and then I would go and make this really great sound. And then I would be shot. And I would make these stuntman falls over the couch and roll into the floor. And my nanny would always get up, oh my God, you can't do that. You're going to kill yourself. And grandpa would just look and he go and shake his head. And I'd do 4 or 5 of those until they finally had enough. I never really could put that together until you wrote that down.
Yeah. So this I'm just calling it a death walk today for the first time myself. So I'm just putting this together too, like at some level. And then when I'm hearing how you're starting to go back to one-on-one practice because you're kind of, drifting away from institutional higher education, even though you're doing a new consulting, process and coaching, still on some people who want to do higher education dissertations and so on. But
Yeah,
I'm just hearing how it's just becoming so fundamental, and I can't help but think that really what you're wanting to do is take people to an edge. I often call it. You've talked about what you've done with your grandchildren, your nephews, taking them to the cliff edge to jump in, and then doing it again in a more conscious way. All of it I just see is you're just constantly wanting to take you to the edge. You think you're at the edge of your life because you got a problem biting your nails and you can't stop. That feels like your edge right now, right? You're talking to your client. And then you're saying, that's an edge, but I'm going to show you another edge. And what I think you're doing is you're showing them an edge that is transformative, not an edge that is dead. It's a dead edge that's actually trapped them, just like that girl on the beach, right? You just talked about. They get trapped at the edge of death and life and who they really are and their purpose, meaning, essence, and all those things. And then what you're just saying, oh, well, I'll include that edge and I'll give it a sacred container, but I'm going to create an edge here. And now you've got two edges now. And your
and
journey
call
is,
that second edge fearlessness.
thank you. Nice.
Call that second edge fearlessness. I got goosebumps.
Nice.
Okay,
Nice.
because that's what it is. When I take people up physically to the edge in Canada, There's this waterfall where the bears go up and grab salmon during the season. And I go down and check, make sure there's no fallen logs that have gotten in the way or whatever, and make sure it's deep, clear water right in front of the waterfall. And I'll say, look, this is completely safe. There's nothing to hit but water. And then, I'll have my grandson do it to make sure they see it. That's good. And I'll say, give it a try. And so I'll bring the person up, and it takes courage to climb up the rocks, and it takes courage to get yourself up to the edge. And it takes courage on the count of three to jump. And that courage is an emotion. And it's an emotion that you can burn out if you do it too often. I know a lot of activists who burn out because they're so courageous.
Probably athletes as well.
Yeah, athletes as well, right? And I was something I specialized in.
Exactly.
And but then I say, okay, I want you just to, on the count of three, jump. And that's all I do. I don't go to that next edge that you just beautifully described in this death walk, which we're calling it. Now they go down, they hit the water, and they go, and they get out. And I go,
I did it. I did it.
exactly. And I don't want to do it again.
Mhm.
All right. And I say, okay, remember I said we had to commit to 2 times. So here we go again. And now we're going back up. And yeah, do I have to really do it again? I did it once. This isn't great, No, we made the deal. So we go up. And now I said, we're going to do something different. He's going to take courage. You got up here again. It's going to take courage. You're standing on the edge. It took courage to get there again. And it's going to take courage for you to jump. But this time, I want you to do this. And then I will say, well, wait, come back here. Sit down for a second.
Yeah. So this is Courage Plus.
Yeah. And I'm going to say, this time, and I'll ask them sometimes, what was that like? Well, I don't know, it's just scary, you know. Okay. This time as soon as you jump, as soon as you leave that cliff, forget courage. Get rid of your courage.
Yeah.
Just
Forget.
ignore the
Forget.
courage.
That's nice. Yeah.
I want you to go into this, what we're calling fearlessness now. I want you to trust the universe.
Mhm.
There's nothing, nothing's going to pull you back up on the cliff anyway. I want you to trust the universe. And I want to get that. And we talk a little bit about how that feels and what that means.
Mhm.
That's all I want you to do. Just trust the universe. And then I'll just do a little hypnosis and say, do you understand what I'm talking about? The beauty and the feeling of that power that you have as a spirit, and how the body that you've had, that your spirit chose, is having this adventure and this learning. And now they walk up. Still takes courage, so they still got that emotion. And then I said, take a big deep breath and go into fearlessness and jump. And they do. And then almost every time, this is a typical story. Well, the first time I was just praying that I was going to be okay, and I hit the water, and I was really grateful to swim over to the shore and get out. Something like that. The second time, oh my God, it was like slow motion. I saw an eagle flying overhead, and below me, I saw a salmon swimming. I felt the air all around me, and it was so warm and beautiful. And then when my feet hit the water, I felt the bubbles all the way down, and I didn't want to come back up for a few seconds, so I stayed down. And I mean, it's transformative. Let's use your term. It's a death walk, but without any of the negative connotations that would bring up in
That's
Western
right.
culture. It's a death walk. It is a death walk of the reality that we're all walking into a death every day. It could happen any time.
Yeah.
What a beautiful thing it is. And the longer we can keep that walk going, the better, of course, but still,
Yeah.
it could
Yeah.
happen at any time. And
And we
how,
know it. We know it's
yeah.
going to happen. We
And the
know it.
nail biting gets in the way of it.
We know, yeah. So there's
Give me a
another
fist bump.
edge.
Give me a fist bump. All right.
There's another edge. Yeah, so that's great. And then you have, which seems to be a core part of the practice too. And I did want to share this brief story of this to get this point across. So the brief story is about 2018 or so, you came up to Calgary and did a Sundance ritual out southwest of Calgary. Barbara and I were there. It was somewhere around
Now with
2019
white
or
standing buffalo.
yeah, wait, Stuntman in Buffalo, and you came up and you dropped in at our house and you gave us this tobacco pouch. You just bought it at the store, and you said, "I'm going to give you this." Well, it's finally empty. Just to let you know, it took almost 4.5 years, 5 years to empty.
And I didn't give you the kind that I give now
No, you
without
probably
nicotine. Yeah.
yeah. So you're in Canada, you only had a choice, and you poked what you did. But just to let you know, that's what I had, and so one of the things, and we've
And
used
you
it.
still have the
We've
envelope.
used it. We still have it to this day. So 4 or 5 years later,
Can you cut out the part with the nicotine?
I haven't. No, I think that's an interesting contradiction
Yeah.
across indigenous to dominant worldview perspectives, capitalism. But the interesting part of the story was is that I we were moving to Vancouver in 2020 during the COVID, and we had a chance, an opportunity to finally leave, and it was going to be a huge change for me because I'm leaving my home territory where I was born and raised in the prairies in Calgary and the mountains and the foothills, which I love so much. So to go to a new landscape and figuring, well, we may not be back. This is like a major change. I had to go through a death and dying to my homeland. And I was ready for it at some level, but not ready for it. And so I came up with this idea one morning of a ritual. And I says, I'm going to ride my bike because to all the locations I can remember where we lived
Oh,
from a kid. So I could remember
everything's
from
going to look bigger to you, probably.
yeah, so from 4 years old, and I knew the communities. I roughly knew where the house would be, although some of them were demolished, and but some weren't. And I just rode my bike one day, and I took the tobacco with me, and I rode to the site. And I went to those sites, and specifically when I was in that site, not around the home, but also, but then I found a site and I said, "Oh, I remember a traumatic thing that happened to me that was a very negative, traumatizing memory. I wanted to go to those." I could remember lots of positive things, so that's not the problem for me. It was really to just focus in on something childhood tragedy of some kind, or assault, or where I assaulted somebody, often of that nature. And I went there, sat and dwelled in the memory, got myself into a bit of a trance state in there, calm and relaxed, but remembering. And then I just forgave everyone of whatever happened. And I thought, oh well, that feels good. But I could feel something wasn't complete. And I took in this tobacco not quite knowing what I'm going to do with it. Because I don't call myself a believer in a lot of religious practices, but I assume it's probably useful. And that's how I kind of operate. And so, because I have this intellectual analytical part, so that's so strong. But I'll probably go along with this. And because this is from 4 arrows, okay, I'll go along with it. Anyway, then the second part that completed that little ritual was so one is remembering, right? Remembering, accepting everything that happened, a sort of type of forgiveness. It all happened because of reasons I don't always know and can understand. But the second part was the real sealer for me, which surprised me, is when I then took into the tobacco and I started sprinkling it on that area, that place. So this would be a place that I wasn't necessarily knowing that I was bonded to. I knew I'd belonged or had been, but it wasn't really bonded to. And then sprinkling the tobacco, I had the image come to me. Why am I doing this? Was you're appreciating right now. This is the gratitude practice that I also know is part of your work, no doubt. After every ritual of taking people to the death, there also has to be a gratitude of some kind, wherever how it comes in. And so sprinkling, and it came to me that Michael, what happened was everything that went on. even the traumas, the horror things, everything that went on was built. Somebody built something for you to do that, for that to happen. And I started thinking, who cut the grass at the park that I played in? Who went and cleaned up at the community halls so that when we played our dance, the hall was clean and they cleaned it up after and prepared for other bands to come and play. I was in a rock band in those days. And who kept the swing set and built the swing set and collected the funding to do those. And all of a sudden I'm going, when I grew up, that was like nothing to me. I lived a life where I was so self-centered in what was there for me. And through the tobacco ritual of the letting and that gifting back, that was the experience I had to appreciate what everything had been built. That no matter what played out, the good and the bad, I at least now felt part of appreciating all the good that had been
Wow.
brought.
Thank
So
you for
I did
sharing.
that at 12 different places before he
Thank
left.
you for sharing that story. It's a powerful story, and it's a powerful testimony to both, the tobacco, historically, it's
Yeah.
got such an amazing story about
Okay.
how and why indigenous people use it, and the spirit that's in sage, the spirit that's in tobacco,
Right.
etc. And so for me as a Lakota, what I see is that, first of all, you're absolutely right. The main reason of its power is that it's an act of generosity.
Right.
It is that giving of something, right? And so people always, when they come to my ceremony, they give me some tobacco, in just a little pouch, or they give me some sage. But there's also power in the reality of the nature that tobacco is, even if it does have nicotine in it, and that what the sage is. I mean, there is a spiritual essence in different plants that have different purposes. And tobacco and sage are two examples of that. And that's why they're so widely used. You could go to another culture and say, well, why are we
Yeah.
smudging
Yeah.
with sage? And well, it chases the negative energy away. Well, why are we smudging with sweetgrass? It brings in love. I mean, over time, people learn what the medicine of a plant is, right?
Right. Right.
And so here you are with tobacco, and you've got the combination of the gifting that you're doing of the memories of these things that is the power of gratitude, the power of realizing the power of gratitude, but you've also got a spiritual connection that is about place and land, right?
Yeah.
And other things that it represents that you don't have to know intellectually, because it's still tobacco and it's doing its thing, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of how I look and it's so cool that you've kept
Yep.
that thing.
Mhm.
You know,
Yep.
the nicotine thing, I gotta just tell a story because I hadn't thought of it in so many years, and if I don't tell it now, it won't get recorded. And Rick Two Dogs, I hope you don't mind me saying this, who's a dear friend now, who calls me
And your
brother.
initiator in a way, right?
Yeah, right. And he calls me brother now. And so during a sacred Sundance, my first one, prepared for a whole year, on Pine Ridge, and knew the guys, did a lot of Inipis with these, tough guys with scars all over their chest and back, and really loved them. And really, this was a big deal. So during the first round, I noticed that right after the round, the women would go and sit in a line of chairs, and the men would go and lay on the ground underneath the shade, just waiting, because we're dancing in the hot 114-degree sun for 4 days without water. And we had these little breaks after a round of piercing. The men would go and sit down and take out their tobacco. in the form of a cigarette, and they would be smoking it. And I was horrified by it. I thought, I'm preparing for the most sacred ceremony that of the Lakota. I prepared a year for it. And around us are hundreds of people coming to get healed. So that, when it's my turn to drag the skulls, I'm going to take my eagle staff and I will stop and touch them,
I
which
see.
is hard to do because getting started again
I see.
is really, hurts, you know. And they're there, with tuberculosis. And there's kids there who see the sun dancers as their heroes.
Right.
And the smoking is a problem on Pine Ridge. We smoke, indigenous people on reservations, I saw a statistic recently, 10 times more smoking than the average population. And it's killing us. It's causing the cancer. People can't afford other drugs mostly usually, but the alcohol is part of it. And so after the first night, I'm in my lodge and I have to say something. You know me. So the next morning, Rick's on his buffalo robe, and we hadn't gone out yet to start. And I brought tobacco to him and handed it to him. And I said, Rick, I said, I'm really concerned about all of these children that are watching these sun dancers do what they're doing in an amazing way, sitting down and smoking Marlboros and Lucky Strikes and all this stuff that's addictive. They're smoking because it's addictive. They're not smoking in a sacred way. They're just satisfying an addiction after doing something very difficult and getting ready to do it again. I'm not seeing any ceremonial aspects to it. And I said, I just had to share that. I've never told this story publicly before, by the way. And so Rick took tobacco. He said, I'll talk to the spirits. Anyway, so the second day goes by. Third day, he calls me over. We mark ourselves with a pen so everybody knows what we're going to do, whether we're going to drag the skulls or go up on the tree or whatever. And so right after the marking, and of course we do a sweat lodge before that, an EP ceremony before that, we go back out getting ready to organize in our formations to do the dancing and the women do their eagle whistles and all that. It's powerful. And and Rick and Ethelene, if you hear this, my apologies for talking about the Sundance. Uh, but I think this is important for people that don't know about our Sundance. And by the way, White Standing Buffalo and Bruce Lipton and I, we intentionally invite non-Indian people to come to his Sundance, right, to learn this kind of stuff. But still, it's not right to be talking about Sundances. So this is very unusual, and the spirits are saying I should do this. He says to me, um, "Come here," and I go over there, and he said, I talked to the spirits, and they agree. Go over by the powwow, get on the microphone by the powwow drum where all the drummers are. Get on the microphone and say what you told me and tell everybody. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Right.
I was a pretty brave hombre
Yeah.
in those times. And I turned to butter. I mean, I was just I mean, I can't think of anything that had given me more fear than this moment
I can
of
imagine.
being asked. And so I went over and in my broken Lakota English, I said what I said. And I mean, my knees were shaking the whole time. My knees were shaking the whole time. When I walked away, I had to go past the row of the 50 women. As I walked, I don't know if I can say this without crying, actually. I'm feeling tears well up now. I I walked as humbly as I could. Um, and as I walked, each woman got up and took my hand and said, "Thank you." All 50 women, one at a time, each one, and said, "Thank you." Wow. And then I got to the men, and no one would look at me, and no one would get up off the ground. And the bottom line of the story is that to this day, Rick's Sundance, you don't smoke, right? And so I just think your story is so powerful for the forgiving, for the understanding of how you can on your death walk, positive, how you can use that kind of resolution of the psyche and the spirit and move forward. And I think that the tobacco issue and this is why, you know, why that nicotine thing, is just,
Right, right. It's
I
a
want
little
you to,
triggering. It's a little
yeah,
triggering.
but I want you to keep it on there because
Yeah,
now I'm
yeah,
saying, oh no,
I
this is
agree.
part of the dilemma of life, and this is part of the contradictions of life and everything.
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
weren't using it for an addictive thing.
No, no.
I'm sure a lot of the tobacco that I get and accept is probably not,
Yeah,
nicotine free. So that's not important. The spirit of the tobacco is much
yeah,
stronger than caring
yeah.
about all the chemicals that's been put in it, right?
Look, we
Anyway,
have 1 minute. 1 minute. I
yeah.
have to get off the Zoom.
All right.
Barbara's going to be
Okay.
on our Zoom account, and
Give
so
it a wrap. Give us a wrap.
yeah, let's just take a couple wrap up here for a minute. Thanks, Barbara. Yeah. Thank you, Foros. Thank you, B. I know she's probably in the background there.
She just came up too, right?
Yeah,
Isn't that a coincidence, right?
yeah. I just was noticing.
Right.
Interesting. But I want to just emphasize, that I'm just having so many images at the ocean of what water represents, and it's so much close to the work of what you do. As you say, you can do that in EP work. You can do very concentrated therapeutic works in all kinds of the therapy office or, you know, the the temple of doing the sweat lodges and so on. But it's like at some level you say, but then there's the walk to the water. And I'm going, that's the walk to the feminine. That's the walk to the mother. And there, that last image that you shared earlier, the mother and the mother possibly to be, but is connected to all mothers. And you swimming around like a fish around those mothers. And they have the right words. So then I go back to your moment at Two Dogs ceremony, Rick Two Dogs, and you basically saying, I'm gonna do this, and if it suits the mothers, doesn't suit the rest, so be it.
Exactly. The feminine principle is so powerful. And
I
again,
think
your insight is to seeing that really emphasized. Let me just close with a prayer
you
because
can
of what we
close.
talked
Let's
about.
do that.
And
Thank you.
let people know that I'm
Yes,
doing the cat fawn now, and I'm doing four sessions, for them, and no more teaching them how to do it, not doing it for them.
I'll put links below on the comments for you.
All
Your
right,
new
brother.
work and all the best on your new work.
All right, brother. Otum kashila wakantanka na makompo na te tewa topa unshimaka ahitu hayam kelo. Oyate oyasin chankuluto ochlamani. Oyak titi. Oyate oyasin. Unchi wichalapona oichakiapo hecho wichosani washte unyo epikdelo. Oyate oyasin chankuluto ochlamani oichakiapo. Ihani lako wicho hanki tunkashi ekise. Mitakoyasa.